Hey everybody, we're going to be talking about how to not take school and life too seriously. So I think this is a really important topic because there's a lot of young students who really take school very seriously, and I used to be like that. And I want to give you some tips on how you can change your mindset and not just not take it seriously, but be much happier in your life and grateful and enthusiastic about life. So for me, I definitely used to take it seriously. It was partially just my DNA, but partially just because I assumed it was the right way. Looking back though, as I grew up, I realized it wasn't the right way. So how did I take it seriously? Well, I would kind of go a little crazy and freak out if a big test was coming or a big homework assignment and I couldn't figure it out, or I knew I wasn't prepared. And sometimes, I would just get stressed out and get very serious at home, or get very frustrated about it. Or, sometimes I would stress out so much that I would try and pull others into it, and other classmates, and I would ask them, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna screw up, and then I'd try and get them to help me out. But it came from a more anxious ridden place, and I wish it came from a more positive place of like, hey, it'd be great if you could help me. If not, I'll figure it out. Rather than this like constant stress and worry that would almost like pull them down or be like a hassle to them a little bit. And so how did I change this mindset, and how can you be more happy and positive? So the first tip is more about looking at others who are happy, positive, and comparing that to your end goals in life. So ask yourself, why do you want to get good grades? Well, oftentimes it's to please your parents or for your own career success one day. Well, why do you want that career success or to please your parents? If you keep asking yourself why to these questions, you'll get to the root cause or root purpose. And usually that ends up being something around money or something deep or something about happiness usually. Ultimately, it comes down to getting this great career or family or just general feeling of happiness. And you realize to an extent when you compare that to people who are happy now is that you don't necessarily need all this stuff to be happy. When I was very, very, very young in elementary school, for a few couple grades, I had this school bus driver who was amazing. He was from Africa, and I couldn't tell which part. I think it was Jamaica or somewhere, but so maybe he wasn't from Africa, but he was just so happy all the time. And here he was making a very minimal wage, just driving people to school. And he was so chill, he was so carefree, and he was so happy and enthusiastic about his job. He often had the music playing and he was vibing to the music. And he was so chill with the students on the bus. He lifted them up, they loved him. And he would often have this big bag of chips that he was eating. He was actually very lean, even though he ate a lot of chips. And he would pass the chips around. He'd just be like, hey, let's all have a blast. So he had this big bag of chips, and he would pass it around, and every student would have some. They would take a handful, as much as they wanted. And, this guy was so generous despite how little he made, and he was so happy as well. So, obviously, I admire that because I only had him as a driver for a couple years, and yet he was still so memorable. More memorable than a lot of the somber or serious bus drivers we had that were usually very boring or kept to themselves. And as I grew up, I saw a lot of people who were making minimum wage who were not happy. And so I also, on rare occasions, see people who are happy. So then when you contrast this to this long-term goal of happiness, you realize, man, this guy has found out the secret to life already, and he didn't need to achieve all this money and be a doctor or something to achieve that. So I'm not saying you shouldn't strive towards goals and career goals and big aspirations. Of course, you can still do that, and you probably should, to just keep pushing yourself in life and reach that potential. But at the same time, you can have a much happier time doing it. You can have a blast, and you don't have to be so stressed out, and your life is not gonna be ruined if it does. So the second thing is to really get a holistic sense of worst case situations. Worst case situation, you don't do well in school. there's still people who do well in their career even if their grades aren't that great. And not just entrepreneurs, but all sorts of other people who took a shift into another industry, whether that's the film industry or as an engineer or marketer or project manager, and they just realized the classes they took in school didn't correlate to their performance outside of school. And so worst case situation, you may be making minimum wage, but probably not even. So as the Dalai Lama says, you really want to take that into account, and you realize that the worst case situation is not even going to happen. So from an income standpoint, you're probably going to be making more than this bus driver I mentioned. And yet, even if you do become a bus driver, I mean, that guy seems so happy and chill and carefree. So really, it's just about attitude. And, he even made his life great despite his financial limitations. So I admire him for it. And then the third tip is just about really figuring out what you care about most in life, and making sure you decide your values, not culture or parents or whatnot. And what I mean by that is oftentimes a lot of these expectations or goals are set by the culture or those around you, but you've never really asked yourself, what do you want yourself? And maybe it's still the same things. Maybe it's getting good grades and getting into a good school, or maybe it's not. Maybe that's something someone else wants, and you may want decent grades, but you also just want to enjoy what you do, find a passion, and do well in life. And so of course, oftentimes those cultural expectations are there to help you, but sometimes they're not. They're just standards that everyone just blindly follows, and they may not be suited for your situation. So essentially, when you have all these in mind and you define your own values and your own goals and what makes you happy, and you choose your attitude proactively, you get a result where you basically are oftentimes a lot happier and a lot less stressed when something bad happens. And with all the other videos I've told you, you can have a great mindset too, so that when you do poorly on a test or homework assignment, or you freak out because you're taking life too seriously, you can reset, you learn from those failures, and you do better next time through your learnings rather than just stress out your health.